I've noticed a lot of people seem to be these days taking up a new hobby. I don't know if you've noticed it. A lot of people seem to be quite happy to go and buy themselves a nice stick and walk about, hobbling along with it. Maybe the sticks come from the hospital. You know, it sort of gives you a certain je ne sais quoi if you've got a stick from the hospital. Or maybe it's a lovely old walking stick that's perhaps made out of, I don't know, ash or something like that. Hobbling along down the street, looking terribly sorry for themselves. Have you noticed that? Seems to be a new fad at the moment. Everywhere I look, somebody seems to has got a stick. And yet, of course, it's not really a new fad. I don't think anybody particularly really wants to go and get themselves a stick and hobble along. And I can't help feeling that the reason I'm seeing a lot more people with sticks or walking very slowly or very carefully or holding on to rails as they sort of get a bit short of breath is it reminds me that only a couple of years ago we all took part, didn't we, in this experiment in which the government, the kind, nice, benevolent government that's been looking after us, who thought, oh dear, there's this dreadful condition flying all the way from China and people are going to get ill. We won't send them to hospital. We'll leave them blue in the face until they nearly pass out and only then attend to them. And then we'll tell them we've got this special magic juice and they'll have to wait a year, so no point trying to get healthy and all the rest of it. Stay inside, out of the sunlight, mustn't go anywhere. And then we'll give them an injection of some medical treatment that's still an experiment and we're not really sure if it's of any benefit, although I have a sneaky feeling that perhaps they did know whether it was of any benefit or not, and possibly that was in the negative. But anyway, that's just an opinion. And as a result of this cajoling and mandating, forcing, demanding that people have this medical treatment, we know that a lot of people, well, they got damaged, didn't they? A lot of people had heart problems and some people had strokes. Some people have had problems with their legs or their arms or their blood or their veins or mental problems. And some, of course, had problems living. That is, that they say that life itself was actually prematurely taken away from them and they just collapsed. And this has been happening ever since, although there is an MP who stood up and questioned all of this, but funnily enough, all the other MPs seem to be very silent on it and are actually poking at this one MP who dared to say, I think there might be a bit of trouble with this medical intervention. And in the end, they eventually kicked him out and he's had to stand as an independent. In fact, now I believe he's joined another group who are a little bit more, shall we say, sympathetic to his point of view. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. This experimental drug that was shifted into so many people up and down the country and in fact all around the world doesn't seem to be the great panacea that it was sold as. And even some of the people who were manufacturing this particular item have proved themselves that actually it wasn't really fully tested because of the speed of science, whatever that means. I have absolutely no clue what the speed of science is, other than that authority figures, governments and what have you, don't seem to have any clue what really science means, because they always think there's one science, a bit like climate change, man-made climate change. There seems to be one science for that, and they don't seem to have any idea that there is another opinion, and that's why they're forcing us down perhaps this sort of stupid route to net zero with the myth that we need to do that. But coming back to the subject in hand, I met one of these lovely people who unfortunately listened to the government at those times when this experimental drug was being tested on well, I say tested, being shoved in everybody's arms, forced by all those ministers who were telling everybody, forced by all those mainstream media personalities telling it, and forced by all those very worried members of the public who actually believed what they were being told, that we should all get this medical intervention. Well, I've met a few of these people now, but I met one particularly the other night, and he said to me, Richard, he said, you know, we have been treated so badly like this and we are the forgotten. And I know there's a lot of people who feel that they've been treated badly by something in authority and they feel that they are forgotten. But this is something really big, isn't it? When you're cajoled, mandated, forced, demanded to take something which you don't really fully understand, it's still an experiment, and then it goes wrong. And when it goes wrong, if you're forced and cajoled or corralled or demanded or persuaded by everybody to do this, particularly by the government, and then it goes wrong, surely the government, those people who are doing all this forcing, should take a little bit of responsibility for this and say, do you know what, we've got this wrong, we made a mistake, it shouldn't have happened, and because of that we're going to do our damnedest to put it right. And all those people who've been injured, who have perhaps a heart problem, or they can't walk properly, or they've had a stroke, or any of those sort of things, then surely the government would actually get off their backsides, not prevaricate and not take time to think about it, but actually do something. If they are this kind and benevolent government who are really there to help us, surely they would be making sure that the payments that are necessary, the compensation, is there immediately, not getting people to hang about for years on end, and also that those payments reflect the damage that has actually been done to those people they forced to have an experimental drug. I would have thought that would have been the number one prerequisite for anybody who's forced anybody to have something that they didn't fully understand or didn't need. But it does seem to be that that's not the case. And why, if that is the case, and if that's what authority figures are doing, and if that's how the government is operating, then in a way you start to think, should these people be in power in the first place? After all, we are the sovereign people, we must remember that, and that we give them the power to administer for the 5 years that they're in. And if they're not doing it right, and if both parties, you know, in a two-party system that we have, are not doing it, or any of the MPs are not sort of causing a stir and saying, hang on a minute, anybody who's been damaged by this thing ought to have compensation because I represent them, because I'm a member of Parliament, I'm a public representative, and these are the people in my constituency, and if they're not being served properly by this government, then surely this government that's doing this and is not doing their duty, surely that government shouldn't be allowed to continue. Should it? I mean, why would you have a government? Now, I mean, I don't personally have much faith in all of them, because there doesn't seem to be anyone, apart from this one MP that I mentioned at the beginning, who was prepared to face absolute end of his career by standing up for the people. The rest of them doesn't seem to have done that. In fact, I've seen letters that people have shared with me when they've written to their MPs, and they just keep saying the same old Bible situation, as if the Bible's been written about this particular medical intervention, that there's this one story, one narrative, that it's, oh yes, we believe 100% in it and it is safe and effective, those magical words. And yet there are plenty of people who might argue with this safe and effective, and they're not getting the compensation. They've been forgotten, and they seem to be just left on the slag heap to get on with things, and that's not right. And any government that leaves people like that and is not looking after their people, in my opinion, deserve not to be in power whatsoever. And in fact, I would probably say that actually the whole damn lot of them deserve not to be there, and that we need to find a whole new system where we, the people, actually take care of all those people who are damaged and hurt, and take care of ourselves, and rewrite all those laws and look after and govern ourselves. Because it seems to be that we are much more compassionate, benevolent, kind than those people who we thought, by voting them in, would be. But what do you think?